What did President Bush do unilaterally, despite all this talk about our coalition partners? This was an American invasion. He dismissed NATO, he dismissed our alliances, and he unilaterally invaded another nation. The Democratic Party, I believe, does not stand for that principle. We believe in international security and alliances with our democratic allies. We believe in citizen duty. We believe citizens owe something to their community, to their state, and to their nation, and indeed increasingly to the world in which we live. And finally, we are the party of equality and justice. This has not been the Republican Party. It may have been 100 years ago, but it has not been the Republican Party in the age of Reagan. I think our national leaders, particularly those who seek the presidency, have to either, they don't have to accept my manifesto, but they ought to come up with one. They ought to tell the American people what the Democratic Party stands for and what makes us different. Now, with all due respect to President Bill Clinton, who has been my friend for a third of a century, since 1972, the centrism and triangulation, that is to say, let's kind of blur the distinction and find some amorphous center, may have appealed to independents for those two elections, but it left no identity to our party. And it is very important that the Democratic Party tell people what we stand for, and I think particularly post-Iraq, because so many people were confused by the leadership, so much of the leadership of our party supporting the Iraq invasion and continuing to stay in Iraq. Some have courageously said they made a mistake. Giving our president carte blanche to keep Guantanamo going, and Abu Ghraib, and torture, and surveillance, and all the rest of it. We need to re-identify ourselves. I know when the Iraq War started going sour, I used to get stopped on the streets of Denver and cities all over this country. People would say, what do the Democrats stand for? What do the Democrats stand for? And either you accept the kind of principles that I've outlined or come up with your own. But they ought to identify our party. They ought to tell people what makes us different, not how we're some kind of amorphous organization that kind of believes everything. And you know, we do welcome everybody in, but we stand for some principles. We have to reestablish those principles. I think those of you serving in office have to do this every day in the state legislature and in various other offices. Our elected representatives in Congress have to do this, but all of us have to do this. I am as strong against the merging of church and state as anyone here, or anyone since Thomas Jefferson. But I do think there is one comparison of political parties and religions, and that is parties must stand for something. They must believe in something. They must believe in something that makes them different. Otherwise, they have no reason to exist. A political party must have a soul. And the question is, what is the soul of the Democratic Party? What are we willing to live and die for that makes us different from Republicans? That's the challenge of our party in the early 21st century, and it really is the challenge of the young Democrats, because you are the future of the Democratic Party, and you are the future of this country. Thank you all very much for letting me speak.
The environment that's related to this discussion?
Well, here's an odd thing. I think anybody who knows American history knows that the pre-environmental movement was basically called the Conservation and Preservation Movement, and it's very much identified with an early Republican, Theodore Roosevelt. And even oddly enough, I have to grit my teeth a bit when I say it, Richard Nixon acknowledged a Republican commitment to the environment, but not in the age of Reagan. When my generation of Democrats, including Dick Lamb and Tim Wirth and Pat Schroeder and others, when we got a chance to serve in Congress and in other offices, I think we carried to those offices a message that was very much central to the culture of Colorado and the culture of the West. And that is, and it had its roots in the conservation and preservation movement. But by the 60s and 70s, it had become the modern environmental movement. We believed we couldn't continue to poison the air and the water and the soil of this country. It was an immoral way of doing business and leaving those poisons for future generations. So we were active.
They agree strongly.
The real future. Exactly.
Wow.
The real future.
We were active in trying to pass clean air laws and clean water laws and toxic waste disposal laws. And the fight goes on, and now it's getting to critical proportions. I told Ken earlier this evening, my current capacity at the University of Colorado as an occupant of the Worth Chair, an endowed chair committed to sustainability, the environment, and energy independence. I am helping lead 2 climate change projects. One is to prepare a dramatic 100-day action plan for the next president. New legislation, new regulations, and new executive orders and decisions that the next president can undertake, man or woman, within the first few weeks of an administration to reverse climate change. That will then position us for what the second project entails, and that is international leadership. I think we all know George Bush has had nothing to do with this issue, has not wanted to have anything to do with it, and therefore has not been involved in the international effort. It will not succeed without us. We cannot make it succeed by ourselves, but we do have to be involved, and we can't be involved until we undertake an agenda here at home. That clearly involves fuel efficiency standards, a whole variety of cap and trade or carbon tax possibilities, and we're going to lay out an agenda there too, including so-called upstream cap and auction. This gets very complicated. All the alternative fuels. But we also will lay out, in a separate project, an agenda for the next administration, post-Kyoto, to position the United States as a world leader in the global community at reversing climate change. The people involved in these projects are among the leading 50 or 100 environmentalists and climate experts in America, and increasingly internationally. And some of them believe this is reaching critical proportions. I think you're all familiar with the studies of Jim Hansen at NASA, who this administration tried to shut down or fire and couldn't. Mr. Hansen said 3 years ago that we would reach a tipping point in 10 years where climate change could not be reversed. It caused a furor, but the more the scientists look at the data and the acceleration of climate change, the more they believe Hansen was right, which means the clock is ticking. Time is not on our side. We do not have a lot of time to prevent this from reaching that tipping point. So that's what these projects are about. And once again, this is an initiative, although both projects are nonpartisan. Clearly leadership on this rests national, state, and local level with the